Hi guys, David here with another science update. So today, the first article that I want to talk about is called Planets Gone Rogue Could Sustain Life. And it says that a rogue planet is an interstellar object of planetary mass without a host planetary system. As they freely roam around in space, could they be fertile nurseries for life? The first thing that I want to point out that I learned from this article that's very interesting is just the number of rogue planets. It says that for every solar system discovered, there are approximately 30 to 40 rogue planets traveling in the cold expanses of interstellar space. And for contrast, for every solar system, each solar system contains a handful of terrestrial planets, so maybe in the range of 5 to 10 at most. And so there are 3 to 4 times as many rogue planets that are not connected to a specific solar system as there are planets which are in a solar system. I think that's super interesting. If you're thinking about basically the amount of real estate available in the galaxy, it looks like a lot more of it is in the form of a rogue planet than an actual planet that's in a solar system. Another thing that's pretty interesting is that probably some interesting rogue planets are a lot closer to us than, say, like the planets around another solar system. So one of the authors says you might be able to get to a rogue planet in a few decades, and rather than looking for other planets around other stars, this might be the best chance to study these planets. Through a combination of gravity assists and suitable propulsion systems, you could reach the rogue planet in 20 years or so. And the reason why you might want to go to these rogue planets is because, as is the point of the article, there's a chance that these rogue planets might actually be able to support life. Although they won't get a lot of sunlight or starlight, I suppose, because they're out in sort of the wastes, the interstellar wastes, there's a possibility that through a combination of geothermal activity and a good atmosphere, some of these planets could still be hosting liquid water. So the idea is that life could survive on a rogue planet via oceans prevalent underneath a thick layer of ice. So the cold of interstellar space would be too much for the oceans to remain entirely liquid, but the researchers believe that biospheres could be protected from the cold via the ice layer, and then the planet's core would heat the planet from the inside via, geothermal activity. Underneath the ice would potentially exist Earth-like oceans that could support life. Now, it would be very dark there, so it would be, they wouldn't have photosynthesis going on there, which is the basis for a lot of the life that happens on planet Earth, but you could have other forms of microbial life and maybe even more complex food chains. So I think that's a pretty interesting insight. There could be planets with liquid water, perhaps underneath an ice layer, that are a lot closer to us than the 4 light years or so that it would take for us to get to Alpha Centauri, which is the closest star. And I'm not even sure if any of those planets are likely to have water on them. So if we could get to a planet that has liquid water in 20 years or so from the launch of a mission, then we might be able to get some of these answers about what is it like can life develop, let's say, on another place that has liquid water, or is the origin of life on planet Earth entirely anomalous? So the other article that I want to look at today is called How Would Humans Decompose on Mars? And it's a little morbid, but I think it's interesting, and with potential Mars missions coming up probably within the next decade or two, it's a good question. People have said essentially that the first Mars journey is going to be a one-way ticket, which is to say, it's so logistically difficult to get a human being to Mars that the chances are that they're not coming back alive. So that leads to the question of how do you handle and think about human remains on Mars? Right, so the article says, whether we're sending a small crew on a round trip or shuttling colonists with one-way tickets, someday, somehow, someone will die on Mars. Probably sooner rather than later. And because of the potentially prohibitive logistics and cost of transporting their body back home, it might very well need to stay there. So what would happen to a dead body on Mars? So the article points out that decomposition of a human body on Earth is a very complex process, and so basically you go through various stages. So the body cools, the blood begins to pool due to gravity, then rigor mortis or temporary stiffening of the muscles set in, After that, cells begin to break down the body's own enzymes to destroy them, which is called autolysis. Then putrefaction occurs as the bacteria that help us digest our food keep right on trucking along. So it's autolysis and putrefaction that cause things like discoloration and other skin changes as well as bloating. Then scavengers, including insects, birds, or other animals, and then fungi move in, taking care of the rest of the cleanup. A main factor that affects decomposition on Earth is temperature as well. So if obviously as you lower the temperature, it kind of slows down the rates of all of these processes. So on Mars, things would be different. The first few stages, the body cooling, the blood pooling, and the body stiffening would still take place. But there might be almost no other signs of overt decomposition. Autolysis and putrefaction would continue until the body froze, except that most of the bacteria in our body are aerobic, meaning they need oxygen to function. So on Mars, only the anaerobic bacteria that don't require oxygen could work until freezing. So that means that putrefaction would be extremely limited. And then after freezing, the body would dry out, the moisture would evaporate, even though it's cold, through a process called sublimation. And you would basically get a pretty good mummy. They say the likes of which might have made the ancient Egyptians jealous. The desiccated tissues would likely be very stable for an indefinite period. Alright. Just when you think it couldn't get more morbid, they say, but both burial and cremation have a significant downside, the loss of potentially precious biomass. So they're saying that burning this body or burying it would be a loss of precious resources for everybody because biomass is so limited. Perhaps the best choice could be to recycle that biomass as would occur on Earth. In that case, it might be best to bury a body not outside in the Martian soil, but instead in a temperature and moisture-controlled Earth-like decomposition greenhouse with organisms such as insects and fungi to eventually turn that body into usable fertilizer or soil. So that's pretty interesting, and I think that this is going to be a matter of real practical concern when they actually start doing Mars missions, because as the article says, sooner or later someone's going to die on Mars, and I hope they have a plan in place to handle this in a dignified fashion. So thanks so much for watching. This has been another science update. I hope you'll subscribe and like the video and join me again in the future soon. Bye.